so much for joining us for a trip to Antarctica with Jack Holmes. Is Antarctica on your bucket list? Penguins and more penguins, polar dips, seabirds, orcas, zodiac explorations, amazing ice and scenery. Join traveling photographer Jack Holmes as he cruises to Antarctica with stops in Buenos Aires and, I should have tested this out beforehand. How am I doing, Jack? How do I pronounce that? What is it? Ushuaia, Argentina. My apologies. Jack is a travel photographer and owner of Images from Near and Far at Western Avenue Studios in Lowell. A retired high school teacher, Jack previously served as the president of the Greater Lynn Photographic Association, as well as the gallery manager of the Loading Dock Gallery in Lowell. Jack regularly gives armchair travel presentations to senior centers and libraries in the area. I did want to acknowledge the libraries in Ashland, Topsfield, and Medford for partnering with Tewksbury and helping spread the word. And again, want to thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library for being the primary sponsor. So all 125 of us, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Jack for joining us this afternoon. And Jack, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining with me. As Robert said, I'm a traveling photographer. Been traveling and photographing for some 6 decades. Most people who travel to Antarctica travel there through the city of Ushuaia. Ushuaia, Argentina is at the bottom of Argentina, bottom of South America. When we traveled there in 2011, the visa for Argentina was $140 each if you arrived by airplane. There was no visa if you arrived by a car or foot. Anyway, you have to go in by plane somewhere or another. We also traveled to Uruguay, across the river from Buenos Aires, and then we traveled up to Iguazu Falls in Brazil after the trip was over, but those aren't covered in this particular program. Each of those countries has a pricey visa that was in response to the one the United States applied to South American countries after 9/11. Some cruise ships do travel in this region. They go from Buenos Aires down Drake Passage and then up into this region here. Most recently, about a month or so ago, one of those larger cruise ships got hit by a rogue wave down in the Drake, and one of the woman passengers was killed in the process, which was unfortunate. This colored portion of the map here shows what Argentina lays claim to. If the Antarctic Treaty of 1959 is ever modified, their land and sea stake is still valid. 12 countries with bases in Antarctica signed the treaty to preserve Antarctica and the seas around it as a non-militarized zone, and it was dedicated to scientific research. These countries have bases on the continent, on the islands, for the same claim reason that Argentina does. Ushuaia is the primary expedition port. It's good to arrive early in Ushuaia from Buenos Aires. The normal domestic airline has earned a reputation for late flights and leaving checked luggage behind. When we arrived, an agent was standing on the luggage conveyor announcing in English and Spanish that some checked baggage from Buenos Aires did not arrive on this flight. It will arrive tomorrow. He did mention the time of that arrival, but it was very near to our departure of our ship, so we are really glad that our cold weather gear did arrive on time. Our ship is the EMS Expedition. Here it is at the dock. It's an icebreaker carrying 130 passengers plus 68 crew and staff. We traveled in December of 2011 with Gap Adventure, which is based in Canada. This is not our ship. This is not. This is a Ushuaia in the distance across the Beagle Channel, the Marshall Mountains in the back. Airplane passengers were thrilled when we came over the mountains and then passed over the channel and then landed at a small airstrip up the Beagle Channel. It was a kind of an exciting arrival. Ushuaia has a permanent population of about 85,000 in 2020. It's bigger during the cruising season, which runs from December through April. And it has a feel of an Alaskan coastal town. Yeah, this is a signpost photo opportunity that you might see down there. Tells you where things are when you travel. There we go. There's a flower garden here. And this flower garden was near the memorial to Eva Peron, more popularly known as Evita. The time to spare before our cruise departure the next day, we took a national park bus to Tierra del Fuego's Bahia La Patilla National Park. They have a lot of wild lupine there, and then kelp geese. These kelp geese are all over the place. It's a large bird. December through March is considered austral summer in this part of the world. On December 21st, which was the first day of astrological summer, weather was 50 degrees with a calm breeze, and it was mostly sunny. And then we were visited by a Fuegan fox. It looks like he's yawning here. I can't think I'm that boring. Now it's curious about something that's in the bush, I think. Here he is, up along the path a bit, seemingly unnoticed by this woman here in red. I think this fella did, in fact, take a photograph of it. Here it is preparing to leap into the bush. A scenic park view of before we catch the bus back to Ushuaia. Yeah, we're dressed for dinner at Kama, which was just down the street from our hostel in Ushuaia. I want to thank the waiter for the photograph. Argentina is usually beef, but Ushuaia is seafood. The owner of this was trained at El Bulli in Spain, a famous restaurant. My wife had salad with local greens, and I had a octopus in a boiled potato mold. We had a Patagonian Pinot Noir to go with the meal. For the main course, she had a king spider crab, and I had a black hake with spinach dumplings in a red pepper sauce. Lovely. Oh. Oh, okay, next day, time to board the expedition. This is still at the dock, and well, early evening here, we're casting off. Ushuaia here in the background as we leave the harbor. December 22nd now, it's the second day of summer, 45 degrees with wind and some light hail, which is blown down from the Marshall Mountains. On the ship, I noticed that the tables in the dining room were bolted down and that the chairs were chained to the floor. After an intentionally light dinner, we returned to our cabin. The ship's doctor had announced, we anticipate an adventurous Drake passage tonight. Take some seasickness meds before bed if you have them. We anticipate an adventurous passage. Correct. It was an adventurous passage. 7-meter seas and 50 to 60 knot winds. Is that defined as a gale, or is that a strong gale? I've got a couple Drake Passage stories for you. I woke at 1:30 in the morning to significant rocking and a sloshy stomach. Following the ship's doctor's advice, my wife had taken seasickness meds and was sound asleep. I had opted not to, but now I needed to sit up and focus on the horizon. I calculated the ship's rolling by watching the angle of the curtains in the window. And I figured the maximum tilt was just over 20 degrees. Anyway, after about an hour and a half, I finally was able to lay down and go back to sleep. About 7, I was rocked awake and realized it was bathroom time. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my shiny soccer shorts that I use for pajamas and swimming when we travel. The ship lifted steeply, listed, and I slid off the bed and became airborne and flew across the cabin and crashed into the corridor door. Dazed, I got upright, and just as I did, the ship tilted back the other way, and I was flying back across towards the beds, which were separated by a nightstand. Thankfully, I crashed onto my bed, not the nightstand, with only a rug burn on my knee. I decided that soccer shorts were not the best apparel for the Drake Passage, and that crawling on all fours was going to be the preferred mode of transport. At 7:30 or so, we were served breakfast in our cabins because it was too rough to be in the dining room. I'm glad I wasn't on the crew that was delivering the breakfast. I did manage to have some yogurt before I went back to bed. Later on, caught an albatross flying by the window. And then after about 18 hours, we were out on deck when things calmed down a bit. Here are some Cape petrels flying by. And here we're sitting in the lounge. Some folks still look a little queasy. I admit to being still on the queasy side. There's a lifeboat and a Zodiac behind it. We were drilled on evacuation procedures before we left Ushuaia. This photo was made in Antarctic waters. We all received a Canada Goose jacket on the trip. The inside jacket of that is a warm goose down fill jacket, and the outer layer is waterproof Gore-Tex. In preparation for excursions, we were all fitted for life vests and knee-high boots. This excursion clothing was stored in the mudroom where we would get on the Zodiacs. When fully dressed for the Zodiac, we kind of looked like the Michelin Man. This is Zodiac, and they're named after Canadian provinces because this is a Canadian ship. MS Expedition routinely posted and updated route maps. The Drake could be a lake or it could be Neptune's trident. We left the ship once or twice a day in Zodiacs. This is a procedure for leaving and returning from the Zodiac excursions. You do check in and out like you do on all cruise ships. We were dressed in our body layers in the cabin and then finished getting dressed in the mudroom where we kept our waterproof gloves and pants and boots. We always carried our personal stuff in a dry bag that you kept inside your day pack. You had to hose down your pants and your boots and then step into a mild disinfectant solution. This was to stop cross contaminations from the ship and the land. Christmas Day, our first landing was at this South Shetland Islands at Bailey Head. Later, we went into Telephone Bay. Inside of it, this island is a collapsed caldera. It's still active. The last one in 1960. There are active fumaroles down this region where the Spanish and the Argentinians have bases. Christmas Day, 2011. Bailey Head is infrequently visited because of the tough approach, but it was approachable on this day. We have a greeting party here of chin-strap penguins and a lone Waddell seal waiting on the beach for us. My wife and I each have telephoto lenses on our cameras because we need them. There are 120,000 nesting pair of chin-strap penguins. Here they're carrying rocks for the nest. That's guano on their chest from sitting on the nest. Here's a rule. You cannot approach the birds closer than 25 feet. See why you need the telephoto lens. But if you're down and come, the penguins can in fact approach you. This one came quite close. Notice the chin strap posing here for the tourists. Here are some family territorial statements. You can't get closer than 50 feet to a nest, which is what this is. And you can see here that there is a chick in the nest. That's why you need a zoom lens if you really want to focus on the penguin activity on the peninsula and the islands. Neptune's Bellows is the entrance to Deception Island. Here it is, the head, Bailey's Head. There was an abandoned whaling station at this point here that we did not land at. Most landings are bow first, but not today. But you always climbed into a cold sea and the water could be up to your knees. Difficult landings are mostly at Deception Island. 30-knot winds, about as high as you can go and land safely. They were the toughest on Deception, but easier elsewhere. Collapsed caldera here in Telephone Bay. This area may receive 50,000 visitors a year, while Antarctica may get as much as 1 million. We have some braided streams across volcanic sand and Santa Swim for the Brave. Swimmers got a Polar Awards certificate. I designated myself as a photographer. I was not going into that water. 35 degrees, partly sunny, 34-degree water, and a 20-knot breeze. That makes for a quick dip and a quick out. But it really was a kind of a beautiful summer day here at Deception Island. It could have been snowing. Morning landing on December 26, Boxing Day, was at Port Lockroy on Goodia Island. This is a World War II English listening outpost. Now it's under the British Heritage Trust. It's an English presence in Antarctica, and it has a post office there that sends some 70,000 posts a year. It could take as much as 2 months for those posts to get back to their destinations. Here, a room for 2. It's an awfully thin mattress they've got. And there's a kit room, cross-country skis. I did not see any snowshoes when they were there. I'm sure they must have had them. The view out of the window. You'll see a sled in a bit. Tourists and residents. They did research to find out if the tourists affected these penguins. Turns out it was slightly to their benefit. Gentoo penguins. Gentoo penguins have headphones, not a white neck with a chin strap. So these are Gentoos. There's a white sheath bill at a Gentoo nest, and it's because of the the tourists that the sheath bills are not as aggressive here as they are at other places. They're aggressive scavengers of eggs and young birds, penguins and terns and the like. This penguin has 2 chicks. There are 3 nests here, and the usual sheathbill, which is looking for opportunities. Here, this one is strutting down the slope past the sled. I don't know if they had dogs on the island or not. I never really found that out, and I suppose I should research that. Afternoon landing on continent at Paradise Bay on December 26th. Paradise Bay, this is Argentina's Brown Station, it's called, on the Antarctic Peninsula. We'll come back to that in a bit. For some ships, about 70 passengers could be on the land at any one time. So we were split into 2 parties, Zodiac cruises like this, for a couple hours while other people were on land. They're dressed for a 2-hour Zodiac cruise. These are calm waters. You can see the reflection here. We're dressed in layers, multiple cold weather layers, under layers, hats, waterproof gloves, pants, Canada Goose jackets. There's a ship here. A private yacht was anchored in the Paradise Harbor. There were people on board that ship. Quiet and calm it was. Sounds were ice calving from the glaciers and occasional whale blows, seabirds, growler ice and brash ice against the Zodiacs. There's a lot of ice in here. Bergy bits, as these are, they're smaller pieces. Growlers that, like this, bump into the ship, bump into the Zodiac as well. The blue color is because the air is squeezed out of the ice. Ice is actually blue anyway. Here they're kind of sculpted. So these are natural sculptings by the weather. 4 p.m. It's our turn to go to Brown Station on the peninsula. Brown Station's an Argentinian summer base. You can see their flag here. They were not there at this particular time. But I was on my 7th continent. That blew my mind. 7th continent. It's a beautiful and stark place, Antarctica. And my wife, 20 degrees, and the snow is beginning again. Here's some snowmen at Brown Station. I don't know if they're making a polar bear or not. There are no polar bears in Antarctica, by the way. The other thing you can do there, you can do butt sliding down the hillside. Antarctica Circle, December 27th, near Adelaide Island. Unable to land due to wind and pack ice, we gathered in the lounge and waited and watched the big screen TV and waited and we crossed it. At about 2:30, we cheered, offered a champagne toast. We couldn't land because of the packed ice and maybe fast ice. By the way, it was never dark when we were there. My wife woke at 3 a.m. and went outside to take this photograph. I just kind of rolled over and shot it through my window, and she has a much better photograph than me. Beautiful. Look at that. Look at that. Amazing. Lanier Channel, December 28th. Every small Antarctica ship cruises this particular channel because of the scenery and the wildlife. A lot of sea mammals here. This is a small whale, a minke, I believe. Blow, and then a dive. This is a humpback. This kind of behavior, I believe, is called eyeballing. Kind of stands up and sticks its head out and looks around. Lanier Channel is known for its scenery, which is why almost every ship goes into this channel. This famous snow-capped formation is frequently photographed. Una Spivey was a secretary in the governor's office in the Falklands in the 40s. A German climbing team was first to climb this 2,000-foot tower back in 1998. Here, two Gentoo on an iceberg. This is Plano Island in the back, and we were intending to go into this and land, but you can see that there's a significant amount of pack ice here. And it wasn't sure how dense it was in the channel, so from looking around, the captain decided it was not a good idea to go in there and get stuck. So we did not enter the channel. And said we sat here for a while. Notice the dense ice pack here. If it connects to the land, it's called fast ice, and you really don't want your ship getting involved. So plan B, what do? Well, you shoot what you're given. Here there's a skua flying by and some sculpted Bergy bits. Here's a Gentoo on a tabular ice sheet. Some growlers in the foreground. Here there's some Gentoo surfing across the channel. Brash ice and growlers. Kind of looks like they're having fun with this. But, we'll come back to that but. Here's Meg doing some Tai Chi while we're parked. It was really pretty warm in the sun. Temperature got to the upper 30s, maybe 40. So it wasn't too bad under this condition. This young lady is shooting the ice along the side of the ship. Growlers are bigger. Brash ice is small. And this was always, you could always hear this on the hull of the ship and also against the edge of the Zodiacs. Well, we finally turned and returned out the way we came. Love the reflections here in the calm water. I left this lady in because I wanted you to see what the size of this scenery looked like. What rock formation do you think is around the bend here? Yeah, you're probably right. But we're sailing out the other way. Telephoto lens on the camera. Got to make sure you have that if you intend to photograph wildlife. Even the wildlife on the ship. This looks like a ship, penguin. Orca hunting. Now this was a show. This was a show. Orcas were teaching the young orcas in the pod how to group chase swimming penguins, catch them and eat them. Penguins are the primary food source of these orcas. Here, this one caught a Gentoo, tossed it in the air. Here, let me get a little closer. You can see it's the penguin's upside down. And then it rose up and caught the penguin in its mouth and then sunk down and disappeared. Orca hunting, wow. There were several minke whales in the neighborhood and they hugged the ship sides so that they could stay away from the orcas. But the orcas seem mostly interested in the penguins today. Orcas are a beautiful animal. Skuas, gulls, petrels, they're feeding on the remains of the orca hunting. This is my competing alpine glow photo I took in the Lemaire channel. I specifically went out on deck for this one because I knew that the otherwise failed. Neko Harbor, Graham Land, and Antarctica continent. This is the second on the continent landing we had. Gentoo penguins here. Note the clouds which are kind of piling up behind the mountains in the background. Here's a Gentoo posing. This is not a Gentoo posing. A Gentoo sentry here. The sentry is overlooking this Penguin Highway. You're not allowed to walk on Penguin highways. So when we got there, the ship's crew would have staked out paths that you could walk on safely away from the penguins. You did still have to pay attention to the landscape because you could sink between rocks into a deep hole. This guy's actually posing, but it does happen. Be careful when you're out there. Weather's changing. Weather's changing. Changes quickly here. Here we go, a little Gentoo walk. I didn't take movies at that time. Ice crystals. These must have taken quite a while to grow, long ice needles. From a Zodiac in Wilhelmina Bay near Enterprise Island. There's a skua flying by. If it's not too rough, you can photograph from the Zodiacs. In 1916, in the safety of the bay, this fully laden whaling ship caught fire while it was working. The captain decided to save the crew. He needed to beach the ship. So in doing so, he saved all the crew, but lost the whaling products that were on board. Now the ship is territory for these Antarctic terns. The Antarctic tern is very much like the Arctic tern, except it's bigger and sturdier. We see Arctic terns up in New England. Sculpted Bergy bits here as well. Bergy bits of fresh water that off of calved glaciers, and they really do get sculpted. This is a pair of cupcakes. Here is a swan. We had some sea kayaking on board. You had to sign up really early to do this, and most people did them in pairs in these pair kayaks. They were interviewed and tested before they were really allowed to venture out. There also was some camping too, but we weren't involved in that. Camping on the continent. Some sea kayakers in the brash ice. And here they're returning to shore, returning to the ship. I think there were 6 excursion kayaks that we used. This kayak was one of the leaders' kayaks, and they paddled solo. They're taking it out of the water into a Zodiac, and then they go back into stored in the mudroom. Some of our not lockers, but where we keep our kit in the mudroom hangs on these posts here, and they're stored along the wall. Another day for a polar swim. You jump off the ship here. Notice there's no life jackets on, but they are on a tether. So they swim out and then they swim back quickly. As you can see, I dodged the swim and was the photographer again. You can see the lanyard that they can fish him back in with if you have to. Damn, that was cold, he said. We're at Cooverville Island here. The 2-hour cruise. Pilot of the Zodiac and my wife. We're sleeping here on a berg. I don't know if this is a what-ell seal or a leopard seal, but it's whatever it is. It's having a pleasant dream apparently. This is a leopard seal, and they're rather solitary, and they don't like being near people, so they kind of get away as soon as they can. A crab-eater seal here, tabular bergy bit. We're near Cuberville Island. Crab eaters are very common, but they don't eat crabs. It's almost like he's asking if he's cute. And then he lays back and then kind of flaps its flippers. This is an eroded iceberg. Icebergs have to be over 8 meters high to be called a berg. Less than that, they're called bergivits. Freshwater, this is sea ice. And when it's really cold, you get this greasy stuff, and then it forms into pancakes. And these pancakes assemble and they form pack ice. And they sometimes incorporate other kinds of ice with it. That's tough stuff. Now we're on Cuberville Island. A little bit of snow in the air. There are a pair of trios. There's some gentle belly gliding. When there wasn't a highway, they would glide across the snow on their bellies. Across the bay. Is this a duck with a flag? Maybe it's an Argentinian flag. They just won the World Cup. No, it's a gentleman penguin. Here we are, a week into summer, 16 degrees, snow on the wind. She had her turquoise instead of her black on. It's a kelp puddle on the edge of the cove for gentle cleaning. This mess on that chest is guano from tending the nest, and they did have a stinky penguin shit smell about them, but you did kind of get used to it. They would go into the water, they dive in, they turn, twist and turn, rub their chests with their flippers, wings, what do you call those? Then rub and turn, and they come out, look pretty good. Yeah, getting all nice and clean. Then they go back and their turn on the nest. Arctowski Station is the Polish presence in Antarctica. This is named for the meteorologist Henryk Arctowski, who proposed the concept of wind chill. Long ago, this island was a whaling station, hence the whale bones that you see here. This staff member has got a vertebrae for a seat. Here's an Adelie penguin. This is the third type that we are seeing. Notice there's no chin strap and there's no headphones. We didn't see a lot of those. 2 chin straps, a chin strap couple calling. This couple is not calling. A gull feather on what looks to be a volcanic rock. I don't know what sea mammal this was. My suspicion is it's a dolphin or a porpoise or something, but I honestly don't know. But it was quite old. You can see the pores on the skull. There's the fourth kind of penguin that we saw. We only saw one of them, and it was high on the beach, rocky beach. So I don't know if it was on a nester or not. Anyway, this is a king penguin. We couldn't get up there to see if it was nesting. This is what the land looks like when the snow is melted. And you note that some of our people up high on the ridge, I would recommend if you like snow, be there in the early season, because otherwise it's too wet. The shrine at the station, it's to a Polish wildlife videographer who is buried here. Here's a more intimate shrine that the staff from the base had erected at the base. There's a Gentoo checking out a skua as it flies off. Some chin straps and Gentoo checking it as it flies away. Expedition on the horizon. It's time for us to leave this year-round station. This Zodiac is loaded and returning to ship for 11 days, 13 locations, 11 landings. The northern part of the peninsula is called Graham's Land, and the southern part is called Palmer Land. Most of the landings you can see on the islands, and a couple on the peninsula itself. After a New Year's Eve party in the shelter of King George's land, we begin a return passage to Ushuaia across the Drake. It was much calmer this time. It was still rough, but it was much calmer. A lot of seabirds. This is a black-browed albatross. A lot of albatross in the Drake Passage. Returning calm passage in the Beagle Channel as we head up to Ushuaia through the port window. And we're back in Ushuaia. Thanks for traveling with me to the far south. If you have any questions, I can try and answer them. Robert, are you there? I wonder where Robert is.
No, I'm here, Jack. I apologize.
Not a problem.
I'm on a computer that I don't use very often, and things aren't running too smoothly. But anyway, so folks,
I understand.
if you have
Some people ask me why we chose this particular itinerary, and I will tell you that it was going to be the seventh continent, Antarctica. It was going to cross the Antarctic Circle, which I wanted to do. My wife, who does a lot of the research, understood or noticed that the couple of years before we went, this particular company had experienced an incident where an iceberg ripped their previous ship and made it impossible to complete those things. So she figured that by going with this group now in 2011, they would have a new ship, which was true, and it would be safer and easier to work with than not. So we chose this group particularly for the itinerary and the increased safety. I would say that Antarctica travel is risky. So yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You had questions.
Yep. So Margaret says spectacular photos and great information. Thank you. Our line says beautiful way to enjoy the holidays. Diane says that this was spectacular. Thank you. Frank says bravo, magnificent. Harriet says amazing, and you are brave. Marie says fabulous presentation. Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed the beautiful photographs and sharing of experiences. Lee says wonderful photos. Marion says awesome program. Thank you. Patricia says I enjoyed the Antarctica travel. Was the crew mostly Canadian? Patricia asks.
This crew, on most cruises, the crew does not tend to be from the country that the ship is from. I'm trying to remember where these people were from. I've been on a few cruises, and I honestly can't say, but Filipino. My wife just told me Filipino for the most part, as they tend to be, I think. Indonesian, Filipino.
Yeah. Peggy says, you're much braver than me. I loved going on this trip vicariously. Carol says, spectacular and wonderful presentation. Was worth seeing this adventure. Jane says, wonderful presentation. June says, thank you. I have great memories. I was there in 2002. All right, let's get some actual questions. Karen says, let's see here. Karen says, do you hear the icebergs hit the ship?
Icebergs, that one that did have the problem, I exposure, we probably heard a terrible hit. When we were cruising in the coves, we could hear the calving into the water. We didn't get close to the bergy bits or the icebergs because they could mess up the zodiacs. But the little growlers and the brash ice would brush against it, and yeah, you heard that all the time. Yep.
Myra says, I was in Antarctica about 5 years ago. It was also my seventh continent. We visited other areas, so I'm enjoying seeing Jack's trip. I was lucky enough to fly over Drake's Passage. However, we did encounter wild storms while on our expedition ship. It was a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and Myra went with the organization called Road Scholars.
Yep.
Donnie says, fabulous photographs. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. It looks like an amazing and unforgettable experience. An anonymous attendee asks, when you went on land, did you worry about crevices?
The crew would scope out where they thought it was safe for us to walk, and they'd mark it with flags. So we basically didn't feel too worried about it, but you did want to be sure that you stayed near where they had scoped out.
Yeah. Nancy says, I'm going in March, and I'm I found this very interesting. I guess she's saying I do not need a visa. Okay.
I think things may have changed on the visa front. In 2011, visas were very much part of what we had, hoops we had to jump through.
Yeah.
In March, you're likely to see penguins who are not on the nest, but a lot of groups of the small or the young, the newly born, and not as much ice and snow. So the weather will probably be quite different than what she saw with us in December.
Okay. Mike wants to know, how did you travel from Lowell to the ship?
Okay. When we go out, we tend to go out longer than we need to be on the trip. So we flew Boston to, I think we went to Dallas, Fort Worth, then to Buenos Aires. We spent a few days in Buenos Aires and across the river in Uruguay. Then we caught a plane from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia. On the way back, we did a little extension to Iguazu Falls in Brazil and Argentina. The problem in Buenos Aires when you get there is there are two airports, and you have to know which airport you are flying in and out of, and they may change things. So you do have to pay real close attention to your travel arrangements. And it probably in this day and age, it makes absolute sense to have a smartphone with you. On the way back, the Buenos Aires flight was to Miami, and then Miami to Boston. And somebody asked me the other day, how much this costs now? I would probably plan, it's pricey, there's no question about it. And I would probably plan on $15,000 to $20,000 a person.
Karen says, I heard George's Island is beautiful for king penguins. Do you know anything about this island?
I do not. We went to King George's, but not South Georgia.
Susan says, many thanks, Jack. We really enjoyed this armchair travel. Fabulous photos from Susan and Jay. So, Jack, I think we've exhausted all comments and questions. I should know, and of course, the minute I say that, Jack, every time somebody pops in another question. Now, let's see. Oh, no, Nancy says, I got a great deal with Viling, Viling. The cost was $18,000. That can't be right. Is that right?
It might depend upon what the cruise line services provide and what kind of cabin they have. When I said 15 to 20, I'm talking, I'm looking at price of airlines
Right.
and cruise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so different companies have different things.
Right.
We were with G Adventure, and I think they're still out there.
So I did want to note that Jack's going to be back with. So first of all, I should say I have good news and bad news. The good news is we're going to be doing a lot more armchair travel presentations on Tuesdays in 2023 because between Jack and another gentleman named Jeff, we've been having some great turnouts at these programs. So we're going to do more of them. However, in order to sort of do that, we're going to move most of these to the morning. So just as a heads up, the schedule isn't officially set yet, but most of the armchair travel presentations will be on Tuesday mornings starting next month. Jack is going to be back with us on Tuesday, February 28th at 10:30, and Jack will be doing an armchair travel presentation to China. Jack, do you want to quickly tease that?
Yes, I will. It's called China, Return to New Places. We have traveled there a number of times, Hong Kong, and mainland. So we returned to some of the places we visited in the early 2000s. We returned there in 2019.
And Jack, Donnie wants to know, where are you traveling to next?
Well, in April, going to Southwest France, Bordeaux, Dogon, Carcassonne, Toulouse. Then after we leave that, we're going to begin Portugal for a bit. I have an international exhibit. I have an exhibit hanging in Porto on photography that's based on a trip I did in photographing abandoned farms in North Dakota. No, I have no idea what North Dakota has to do with Portugal, except that the photo essay I'm presenting. The photo essay looks nothing like anything in Portugal, so that'll be a look. The high plains of North Dakota.
Oh, very nice, very cool. So Jack, do you have any last words for the audience before we wrap it up?
No, I want to thank them very much for coming. I really, really enjoyed doing this and being with them.
Yeah.
And
So,
Robert, thank you so very much. When you're not feeling so well, get well, man. Be good.
appreciate it. So I want to thank Jack. Let's give him a big virtual round of applause. I want to thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring. Want to thank the libraries in Ashland, Medford, and Topsfield for helping promote this program. Jack, like I said, will be back with us in about 2 months for armchair travel to China. Look for an email from me later today with the recording, feedback survey, and information about some other upcoming programs. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Have a good one, Jack.
Take care. Thank you, Robert. Bye-bye, everybody.